ladies. There it is. Is there a little bit of a delay? We think we're live? Okay. Ladies, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're always so glad that you're here. I'm so glad to be here today with Susan. My name is Elise, Coach Elise and Coach Susan, and we're going to be talking today about when your needs and his needs conflict, who wins? I think it's this incredible, incredible subject. We've got a lot in store for you all. We want you all to engage a lot today. And so can we start that by letting us know that you're here and that you're live and that it's just not Susan and I talking to one another. So we'd love for you to kind of put that in the chat that you're here and where you're from. We love to say hello for just a few minutes as we get started. So I'm in the comment section. Do you see any comments yet?
I don't see any comments yet. I think we do have some people here, but okay. If you're here, just say something to us. What do you think about this topic? When I read this topic, it feels heavy. It feels like it's a landmine of theology and feelings. Mm-hmm. So I want to know what y'all think about this. And if this is something that you need to learn about, I see somebody's given us a thumbs up. Thank you for that. Hello, Nicole. Thank you for saying hi to us.
Thanks, Nicole. And so we really and truly, ladies, Susan and I really talked about this, and we have a very interactive outline today. And we are going to want you to engage a whole lot. So if you will just kind of start saying good morning, get yourself kind of engaged in that, we would really greatly appreciate that because we really want this to be interactive. This is a tough subject, as Susan was saying. And I think that one of the things that we want to, hey, everybody, thank you. There we go. We appreciate that so much. Tough subject because as Christian women, we are always taught to take care of others' needs before our own. Yes, exactly. And that's why this is a tough subject, because it really does kind of touch on what is very near and dear to us, which is our obedience to Christ, to his word. If you're in the Christian faith, that's really of important to us. And certainly in some New Testament teaching, we were talking about being, taking care of the needs of others. It also doesn't mean at the exclusion of ourselves, because as we look at the great commandment, it's really we're to love God and we're to love others. What? As we love ourselves. So it never says at the exclusion of ourselves, right? And so oftentimes we've been taught that. And so when we come up to these moments of tension, like his needs, your needs, who wins, right? And so automatically we want to default to that belief system. And so today we're going to really engage in this belief system, not in a theological way, in which, really, truly, Susan and I aren't equipped to do that, but we know that it's part of our belief system. So how do we know what it is? Not necessarily question in a negative way, but Lord, is that where you want me to be? Is that what you want me to do? And what does that look like? And so we want to really ultimately to connect this to a lot of our core walking and core strength teaching that you're going to find super helpful. So this won't be that moment like I'm getting all resentful, like, daggone it, I gave in again. And is that the right thing to do? Right? We want you to have be able to stand strong kind of in your internal strength and your core strength about, first of all, what you believe, who you are, and why you will choose what you choose. Okay. And like I said before, we're not the experts theologically on all this. And there are some women out there who are doing some really good work. Gretchen Baskerville, I think her name is, and Mark, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Do you, Susan? Do you know who I'm talking about? It's
no, I'm not familiar. Can you hear me okay, Elise? I had some problem with my
Margaret or something. So anyway, she's really good, and and those women are full of wisdom and have done a lot of research kind of in this topic around this. One of the ways I want to start off today is by asking you all, let's just do it. Let's don't look it up on Google. Let's don't anything. Let's just kind of interact. Like how do you define needs versus wants? Because oftentimes I'm kind of suspect wants are winning out, not needs are winning out. Okay. And so I'm going to look at the chat as we go through, but just kind of off the top of your head, how do you know something's a need versus a want or a desire? Mm-hmm. So what would you say?
So I love that question. I'm glad you asked that, and I just want to tell everybody, since we are on Leslie Varnick's public page,
Mhm.
just be mindful of what you share, because anybody and everybody who logs onto this page can read it, and so just kind of think about what you would want the public to be able to see,
Right.
um, and yeah, and just define what needs are,
Right. Right.
compared to what your desires or wants are.
Mm-hmm. Right. You can live without a want most often. Correct.
Yes.
Needs are like paying your utilities. If you can still live without utilities, people did it for a long time, right? I think
Mhm.
utilities are still a luxury. I want them at this point. I mean, I need them at this point. I would suffer greatly without them, right? Need has to do with health and safety.
Mm,
Yeah.
I love that.
True harm occurs when a need goes unmet. Discomfort is all that happens if a want isn't met. Discomfort. Yes. Yes. Life or
Mhm.
death, basic needs, hunger, medical needs, right? Exactly. And so I looked up a couple definitions really before I got on, just to kind of make sure that I was engaging in the right way. And needs, similar to what Heidi is saying, that needs really are about food, shelter, clothing, water, right? And on some levels, we might could live without a little bit of clothing, but we can't live without, we wouldn't survive in the cold without heavy, we would die in the desert if we didn't have the right clothing. So there is a place where needs really are about, to the fullest extent about our survival, right?
Mhm.
If we did not have the right medical need, we would pass away. If we didn't have food ever. And on some level, to much to our demise, sometimes, sex it isn't as much as a need, but it is a need in the fact that God has asked us to procreate and populate, right? And so that we were commanded to, so we have to participate in that in some level. We want it to be certainly need and want along the way, but I think it gets thrown at women oftentimes as a demand or as a need. And
Mhm.
so we certainly know people who remain celibate, and they survived. So we want to kind of address that, just not necessarily deep and wide, but just kind of understand where that fits. I can remember back to intro to psychology class, they taught it was safety. Probably on some level there is a safety issue around that as well. I would believe I'd agree with that. I feel
Mhm.
benefit me in my life, the need or the want, right? Something I feel like I will die if need not met. And I think I want to say it's something that you probably would die if the need wasn't met. Not just
Mhm.
that it feels like you would die. And I think that that's the struggle oftentimes, is that we are really kind of engaging sometimes and really throwing out this word of need in a kind of in a misused way. And I think
Mhm.
it can be misused with our kids, with our spouses, with our neighbors, with a lot of, our mothers or something, right? In a lot of
Mhm.
different ways. And so that's why I wanted to kind of really engage this just a little bit. And you all are really, thank you so much. Basic needs are vital to be loved and nourished, right?
Mhm.
Um,
And I know some of you are putting things in like trust and connection.
mhm,
And those definitely are needs we have in order to thrive as human beings. But do we need that from a particular relationship? We need it from some relationships. And the way this question is worded today, when your needs and his needs conflict, who wins? And that comes up a lot in the Christian community because of issues like headship and submission. But it's true for any relationship,
right,
um, that we may have conflict because when we're in even relationship with a girlfriend, with a sister, with our mother, with a child, who gets to decide, right? And to really put our need in to proper language. Is it a need that we need from this particular person,
right,
or is it just a want?
right. And it is
I
like,
want to trust my husband. Do I need to trust my husband in order to survive? No. We
right,
can have other trusting relationships and still stay well.
Right. That's a great point, Susan. Do we need, in essence, this relationship for it to be a trusting relationship? Both people have to be trusting, of course. But I love the way you really kind of word that. Do I need it? I need it to certainly thrive, for this relationship to thrive. It's not going to thrive unless it's a mutually trusting relationship.
Yes.
But do I personally need it? Right? Again, I think we come down to kind of wants and desires. It would be a greatest want that the relationship would be mutually trusting, mutually caring, right?
And
Um,
God's want, right?
right,
God longs for us to be in loving, connected relationships, right?
right,
Healthy relationships. And that's what we're going for today. And that's why we're bringing up this topic. How do we get there?
right, right. And so let's just go to the next word in this, wants and desires. Let's just kind of throw that out just a little bit. Needs versus a want and desire. What would be wants and desires that feel very close to needs? Let's think for a minute. Some of those that might feel very close, and trust I think, would be one of those, right?
Mhm.
And so, in essence, I may need trust in this relationship for me to move forward, or for me to kind of understand the dynamics. But once I understand that trust doesn't exist, then I can, within myself, manage the relationship better. I'm not going to keep needing trust for me to do what I need to do in the relationship. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Right. And we're not saying it's okay, all is well, you can thrive. I think it's going to be a huge detriment to a very intimate relationship if there's not mutual trust, right? But when we can say, I don't need this trust for me to be in this relationship. Now I know that this person is not trustworthy. Now what? And I
Mhm.
often use my hands, if you've seen me on Facebook before, just to kind of diagram, or like, mutually trusting relationships. Really, we can get very close because I have, in essence, seen and you have proven out to be trustworthy. So I know I can walk in that relationship in a safe way, right? But once trust is broken, I can't be here any longer. I have to move myself back. Can I trust you here? And so oftentimes when I'm working with couples, I often say, let's don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Sometimes, like, some people are very dependable. They're not trustworthy as far as fidelity, but you can trust that they're going to be good to your children. You can trust that there's going to be money in the bank account. You can trust that they're, going to pick up your children on time. You can trust that, right? And so there's some areas that we can talk about that we can trust them widely. Fidelity, no. And so what will that mean? Right? And so trust can be a very important part, and feel like we absolutely have to have it. We need it. Right. And so this is why we're really teasing out what is a need and what is a want. So Susan,
Mhm.
read off some of the wants. It's my glasses glow.
So I want someone to care about me. I want connection. I want to be heard, known, and understood. I want trust. I want love. Yeah, those are needs. And, we do need love in
Hmm.
order to thrive again, but God gives us that love, right? So a lot of these things we can achieve through our relationship with God. Do
Hmm.
we need it from a particular person? No, we want it,
Hmm.
right? We want it, and we want that relationship to thrive. And so
Right.
there are some ingredients that are needed for a
Right.
relationship to thrive, but we can still be okay without that.
Right. Yeah,
Mhm.
ladies, I love what you've written. I want to be heard, known, and understood. Of course. So taking that in, I really want that. And in James 4, 1-3, it says, what causes quarrels and fights among you? It's the desires of our heart, right? So we are going to strive for that. And so what we want you to do is take a step back and look at yourself, like, what is it when I'm in this needs meeting conflict? Is this a need that I want, or is this a want that I want? Right? Is this
Mhm.
a need that I must have, or is this really a want and a desire? And he has a want and a desire. I have a want and a desire. We can almost say, who wins? right?
Mhm.
Because we can shift this around. I think more often than not, if I were to really evaluate most of the tension that goes on, it's over wants and desires, not necessarily over needs.
Mhm.
Right. And so, ladies, we want you to really take a step back and look at yourself like, is this a want and a desire? So, what does that mean? Of course, we want connection, right? What are we in relationship for if we're not connecting? We can just stay home and, nobody has to fight with us, right? And so, of course, you bet we want connection. And that's what we're striving for so often in this moment, right? So, somebody doesn't want to connect and I want to connect. Who wins? Right? Somebody
Mhm.
wants respect. Someone does not want to give respect. Who wins? Somebody wants, you know, sex. Somebody doesn't want sex. Who wins? Right? We could go on and on and on. And now I hope you begin to see that we're really boiling so much of this down to what James says, our heart's desires, our needs, excuse me, our wants and our desires. And
Mhm.
you can see how easily needs gets thrown in that. Needs really has also, let me say if I may, this somewhat of this urgency and somewhat of this. I was trying to think of another word besides trump because I don't want to bring that up, but other besides a trump card is what I'm saying. Like somebody throws out and like, whoop, I win. I got the fourth ace, right? Like you throw out like, no, I really need it. What do you do with that? It has a level of urgency and a hierarchy because now we've kind of established needs really are about our safety, about kind of like how we will live and survive, right? And so if
Mhm.
somebody throws out and misuses, though, the word need, it kind of has this urgency or this trump card to it, right? And so then now we get in this power struggle. No, well, I need, well, you need, well, I need, right? We get in this power struggle. And so I want you to be really careful about you, not your spouse, about you using the word need and you showing up better representing yourself about your wants and desires. Now
Mhm.
we can talk about who wins. And Susan, you had some great questions. Should we kind of start with some of those? Would those kind of fit now or are
Sure.
we okay?
Yeah. And you have a good point. When we're talking about who wins, if somebody's the winner,
Right,
then the flip side of that is somebody's losing. And
right.
when that happens in the relationship doesn't win. And so the hope is that there would be mutual care and respect for each other, that it would matter to each other
Right.
about needs and wants,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And that coming to a mutual agreement of how do we move forward when we have different wants. And this could also go to not about just needs and wants, but what are our values, right? Some of the issues that may come up may speak to our deep values as a person.
Mhm.
And so, what might those be? What are
Right.
your values as a person? So, for me, I really value peace. And I don't mean a fake peace, but kind of God's shalom peace, where there's
Mhm.
real calm, but also agreement and connection, and that perfect peace that God loves. So I might be moving for peace, but what does this other person value?
Mhm. Right, right. Yeah,
And
that's
that might be driving the discussion.
well, exactly, exactly. And one of the things I may step back with, as Susan and I talked about at the very beginning about, we could kind of deep dive theologically into this, who wins? Because I think that when I read this question, it touches that place for me kind of right away. Like who
Hmm.
wins? Well, does headship win out? Does submission automatically give in? Right. And while what we don't want to do, what I do want to let me say what I do want to do or touch around this just a little bit is that why I pursed away needs and wants, right? So that we could slow the conversation down just a little bit.
Hmm.
And so we're not all incited in that moment, which is so easy. And Susan and I are not absent of that happening, right? That when I'm like, what? And we get all inside and we get all, hot really quick or something, that we can slow the conversation down enough to say, wait a minute, are we fighting over true needs? Are we engaged in conflict over true needs? Are we engaged in conflict over preferences, over wants and desires? And so oftentimes, ladies, I believe that is what we have been kind of drawn into, in a place where we don't really know the dividing line. It's not my place really to be an expert on where the dividing line is or where, but it is your place. And it is your place with the Lord to know. If you practice, headship and submission, it is your place to know then, what is this, just a preference that I'm going to submit to? Just because he wants a black car and I wanted a white car? Just because he wanted to pay the bills here and not there, right? Is this really an act of love? Because submission is about love. They've been called in to love us well, right? That's their call, and we're called to respond to that love. We aren't called to respond to preference, right? We're called to respond to love. And so that who wins is really important, because we don't want to, as scripture says, write it down, as iron sharpens iron, right? So we are to sharpen one another. And if we capitulate or we submit to, things that are just a preference, is that our iron sharpening their iron? Are they just getting their way? Are we agreeing to selfishness? And so it's so important that we kind of flesh this out just a little bit. Is this really a need? And do I have a similar need? How will we walk that out? The call is to walk it out in love, right? And in mutual love.
Yeah, I love that you brought that out. Submission comes from a place of love. It doesn't come from a place of compliance or resentment, right?
Right.
So if you're being compliant, you're not being submissive, right? Those are different. If you're coerced into compliance, it's not coming from a place of love. It's probably coming from a place of fear. And there might be some ladies here today who are facing that, right? Some coercive control, some manipulation, some harsh abuse, perhaps. And so we want to take that seriously, right? If you are not in a safe relationship, I want to make sure that we hear you and we take that seriously. And that you create a safety plan. And, one of us coaches can help you do that. You can call the hotline. And the hotline is 1-800-799-SAFE. Am I right?
Oh, I'm going to say yes because I don't know.
And they can help you develop a safety plan. So when your basic need of safety is at risk, we have to really press into that and make sure you're safe before we move forward to you not complying, right?
Right. Exactly. Connie makes a point. Why does there have to be a winner? And that's a good, that's a great question, Connie. And I don't know that there, in many relationships, I think that someone on the other side is a pretty strong aggressor. And an aggressive person has to win, right? A passive person oftentimes says, I'll let you win. I don't have to win, right? Assertiveness says, I want you to win and I want to be a winner as well, right? I want you to show up well, and I'm going to show up well. Let's hear it out. And so I think one of the things that when Susan and I often work in very destructive relationships where there really is a clear winner and a clear loser, because that's the dynamic of the relationship, right? And so, my goodness, my phone, I'm so sorry. Yeah. And so there doesn't have to be a winner, Connie. Sometimes there is, but that's through mutual understanding, right? Otherwise, somebody really gave in and complied and basically acquiesced. And there are times, listen, ladies, don't let me, hear Susan and I think that there aren't times, and even in our own relationships, that I'm kind of like, I don't know that I have to win this. I think it's really much more important to you, right, than it is to me. I think that there's a lot of reasons. There's discernment. Certainly there's discretion. Certainly there's, sometimes it's just not nearly as important that I may lean in and say it's going to go this person's way. It may not always be my spouse, but it's other people, it's going to go that person's way. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but oftentimes as assertiveness, and this is something we really want to teach you all, those who are going to join CORE, about how to best represent yourself. And you can't do that without knowing who you are. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to be able to kind of coach you around that, of really showing up well to this moment where it looks like there's a lot of tension and somebody's going to win out. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Is there other ways? And Connie, I really love how you said that. I mean, it's a simple question, but are there other ways that we can show up not as an aggressor and not as so passive that someone's going to win, but assertively? And there is, right?
Yeah.
So there doesn't have to be a winner. Go ahead, Susan. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I love that. What do you do when he makes a decision that you disagree with? What is your go-to? And Elise is right. Sometimes we can get reactive in that, and maybe we don't really care, and so we don't want to have that tug of war of who gets to win. We just let go of the rope and say, okay, fine, you can have this one. But what happens when you are invested and you have a want or a desire that feels really important to you, and he makes the decision and you disagree? What happens in your relationship? How do you handle that currently?
Right. Anybody want to speak into that? We would love to hear. I'm going to lead. I haven't pre-read this. So for me, trust and safety are mutual. The one who is on the other. Yes, without safety and trust is impossible. We can be open physically, mentally, and emotionally without trust and safety. Oh, we can't be open. Excuse me. Yeah, I agree. And so there is, if there's not healthy trust, and just say trust in general in the relationship, it is not going to be a relationship that is going to be as desirable as if it doesn't mean you have to leave it. We just have to know it. And we can't pretend that it's anything different than that. And Lori, that's a great point. If I'm with someone who is not trustworthy, then it's wise for me not to trust them. That's how I'm going to be safe. Right. And so I can manufacture, I can't think of a better word, Susan, you might come up with a better word for me, manufacture my own safety. Right? It's my responsibility then, if I am with somebody who is not safe in whatever area, maybe somebody just doesn't spend money wisely, right? But they've always been faithful, but they don't spend money right. So that's a place where I'm like, oh, I need to protect myself and my finances with this person, right? I don't need to protect my fidelity, or I don't need to be worried about that fidelity. I'm worried about this. And so that's why I said before, there's many areas of trust, not just one area. So let's be careful that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater on this area of trust. Let's also make sure that we don't trust in a place with people who aren't trustworthy. Right? Let's be wise. Be wise. And God's allowed us and given us the ability to be wise. And let's be wise in that. Okay. All right. Is there a question? We'd love to open it up, kind of as we've talked about this now, as you kind of understand needs being different than wants and who wins. We don't want to, say it's about something as simple as, being able to choose the color of your couch or your car or whatever. Those can be hard arguments. We all know that. But we know that there's much more serious things. And so we would love to kind of engage you around that. Why don't you ask us a question? So, Susan, why don't you, while you speak for a minute, let me look at some of the questions.
Yeah. And whether it's on an issue of what color car do you drive or what color couch you buy, or if it's, do we send the kids to public school or do we homeschool? How you have that discussion is important. How you show up is really important. So, even if your husband makes the decision you don't agree with, how you show up is important. What do? Do you say, well, fine, I'm I'm not going to participate, or I'm not going to speak to you, or if you do that, then I won't have sex with you,
Mhm.
right? Do you get coercive in return, or are you showing up as your best self, regardless of your own disappointments or oppression?
Mhm.
And that's really what we do as a team, is to help strengthen you, not only to make sure that you're in a safe place for yourself, that you take ownership for your safety. And if where you're at is not safe, that you learn how to get to a safe
Mhm.
place.
Mhm.
But also getting clarity about the relationship, the details of the relationship, so that you can move towards health, at least from your end of it. You can't control another person, but taking ownership of your part of that. And so, yes, please put your questions in the chat. But as you're doing that, I'll just talk to you a little bit about what we're offering in group coaching. We were talking about, needing connection, needing trust. And then what if you're not getting that in your significant relationship?
Mhm.
Is that you are responsible for finding that elsewhere, right? In order to thrive. And we have found that being in a group program with other people
Mhm.
really satisfies that,
Mhm.
right? We get to encourage each other, we get to build trust, we get to share deeply, we get to sharpen each other, hold each other accountable. It's really fantastic for growth. And while we're doing that, we're working on core strength so that you show up in a way that you feel proud of, that you feel successful, even if the outcome is not what you want. So the outcome may be your husband's still oppressive. He's still lording over you with this idea of, well, I'm the head of the household, so my way rules,
Mhm.
right? So even if that doesn't change, something within you can change so that you can be well, even when something on the exterior of your life
Mhm.
doesn't feel good.
Right. Right.
And so
Leah.
maybe we'll just talk a little bit about what core is. If
Mhm.
if you've been following Leslie for a time, you already know this, but there might be some new people on here that aren't familiar with that acronym
Right.
of CORE.
Right. Yeah. One of our other coaches is on, Leanne Parsons, and she just said, how you show up in a conversation matters. Being aware of how we show up is key. It really is. And it's a really good point. Thanks, Leanne, and that's really what we're saying even in this conversation, as we kind of parse out what are needs, what are wants. And now that I know that, how do I want to show up so that I can be wise? It's like, wait a minute, we're actually discussing, or we're actually in a conflict over wants and desires. We're not in a conflict over needs, right? So that we can bring the conversation down to to a real level, in a place that you have a desire to have purchase this car, you have a desire to have more sex, or you have a desire to, want to shop more or have a new couch, whatever it is. Now we understand what the conflict is. It's about our desires, right? Now who's going to win out there? But we have to show up well. And it's such a great point. And so often, once we get incited, showing up well is off the table. And if we don't really understand who we are, how to steward ourselves well, that's going to run interference when we get in these conflicts, because our natural fight and flight system is going to start showing up. Like, oh, a conflict. We kind of step in, we go, all right, it's time to duke up, right? And we don't duke up with our fist. I often say
Mhm.
that, we duke up with our mouth, right? We duke up with, like, hey, I'm going to
Yeah.
one up you, oh, you think that's smart. Well, how about this, and we don't often run away, but we shut down, we freeze, we shut down. And so really in core strength, we're really trying to teach you how to show up well, that we can engage in the conversation, not incited, not all out, that we can remain calm. We know who we are. We know what we believe, and we can show up well. Now, whether the other side shows up well or not, that's not up to us. That'll never be up to you. It'll be up to the other person. It's only, and this is going to be hopefully a game changer for some of you, that, wow, all I have to do is focus on me, right? I have to be a good listener,
Mhm.
but all I have to do is focus on me and showing up well. And so the acronym of, I'll do CO, you do RE. C
Okay.
is committed to truth and reality. And we do that kind of internally, our own internal truth, and certainly external truth as well. And so, and what is our reality? And so oftentimes when I'm doing coaching calls, or if I do a conference call with some ladies, or, even, some other calls, it's like, well, wait a minute. I'm not sure where someone's going sometimes, because the way you've presented, that's not your reality. Your reality is, and I'll kind of state the reality as they've told me, I'll just reflect back with them. And I'm always confused of like, why are you not stepping into the reality of your world, right? That is not your reality. You're not actually getting that. You want it, but you're not getting that. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
So core is really staying committed to truth, God's truth, the truth of our relationship, the reality of our relationship, and how to stay present in that, right? And what do we do with that? And what will it mean if I really engage, right? Or if, say, somebody doesn't engage with me, what will that mean? What will that reality mean? And so the C is it's such a great start to, the whole acronym, and the whole, time and walking in core strength. And the O is open to the Holy Spirit and wise others. Ladies, there's a lot of wise others, and there's some unwise others as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a podcast listener, be careful what you're listening to. I would ask you to even, question, or, certainly research, even at Susan and I, Leslie, make sure we believe that we're wise others. We love the word. We, research the word. We dive into the word. We also really have a very strong belief system around abuse and what scripture has to say about that. And so, but we're not right on every account. So please be, who are the wise others in your world, right? And we're going to invite that into a small, intimate group. And we're going to be listening and sharpening one another in that group. It's a group no more than 15. And so one of the coaches will be in a small group, but we want you, and we call you to be available. Even, if you're a non-believer, what is the wise other in your world, right? As believers, we believe that the Holy Spirit, that the Word of God is our first and foremost wise other. And then we know that He has given all of us, believers and unbelievers, wisdom so that we can engage in that. So yeah, we want to be attuned to that. Go ahead.
Yeah, Elise did the C and the O. And so the R is being responsible for yourself and respectful towards others without dishonoring yourself. So if you're gritting your teeth and in resentment, bitter and hateful, you're not really glorifying God, and you're not really showing your children a good example of what a relationship should look like. So taking ownership, and applying respect can keep you from deforming your own character, right? Mm-hmm. And then the E is being empathic and compassionate towards others without allowing people to abuse you or disrespect you, right? And so you can do that through having compassion, but also having boundaries, right? Boundaries are actually really kind. People don't often think about that.
Yeah, even as we talk about this who wins, kind of question, right? And we talk, and Susan brings this up, it kind of like, this is walk side by side. We have healthy boundaries really as just because we protect ourselves with our boundaries. We don't put it on other people. Really, it's a kindness to say that you can't do that to me, right? And then it's also a kindness to say that you can kind of depend on, this is who I am and this is who I am not. I won't do that, but I'll do this. And so kind of in this who wins conversation, it's not always a kindness to let someone win when they're going to, when it's in essence, it would possibly deform them, right? Mm-hmm. And we see this in codependence a lot of times, that they'll continue to enable someone's bad thinking or bad behavior or bratting up, as I say. Like their loud voice gets the better of you, so you let them win, right? And so, that's actually not healthy for that person to win by bullying, by coercion, by manipulating, right? We want to be sure that we have strength enough to say, this is really uncomfortable, but I'm not gonna give in. It's not actually, love says, I'm going to do what's the best for others. Right. And so it wouldn't be best for me to give in. It wouldn't be best for me to comply. It wouldn't be best for me to roll over. That would be the worst thing. for someone that I love to do that. And that takes a lot of grit and resilience, especially if you're kind of natural people pleasers, kind of iced with this thought that headship wins out over everything, right?
Mhm.
You know, we have icing with a cherry on top on our belief system. We're going to roll over pretty easy. That's not always the best thing for any of us, no matter what. We kind of know if we always give in to our children, they're going to have cavities and, you know, a deformed character. And so it's really important that we can be empathetic and compassionate. We understand that they're frustrated. We understand that they have desires and that they want their desires to win out. We can be very empathetic and compassionate. I want mine to win out, right? But we don't always give in because we do what love asks us to do. And that's what's best for the other,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, should we go to a question?
Yeah. Got one?
Yes. So what do you do when you both have a different legitimate need?
Okay.
That's why we're here today, right? What do we do?
Yeah. Right. Well,
Well, hopefully the structure of the conversation is following with core strength, right? And that's what we're trying to talk about today is what do you do? How do you want to show up when that happens? Do you want to be in a tug of war of manipulating and coursing each other? Do you want to allow your fight or flight take over and start duking it out, like Elise said, with your words or by running away? You know, by shutting down? Is that what you want? How do you want to show up in the situation? Not so that one of you wins and one of you loses, but so that both of you win, so that you feel proud of how you stood your ground and showed up for yourself and showed up for the other person. How do you do that?
Right. Yeah. One of the things that I look for oftentimes, Susan, is I look for agreement, even if it's actually negative agreement. We can both agree that we want something different. Right.
Mhm.
And so I'm always looking for sometimes where can I begin to extend an olive branch and the other person receive it. Right. So that we can say we actually can find agreement. And sometimes I say, you know what, we have agreement that we're on two different, you know, that we think differently right now about this. Then really kind of asking sometimes, how do we, if it's possible to engage the we-ness there, how do we want to manage that? Because I'm pretty resolute about how I feel about this. I see that you're pretty resolute about how you feel. And that's where we can have empathy and compassion. They have equally as strong an opinion about that. You know, is this the best time? Right? So there's three little things that I mentioned. Sometimes it's just a little tidbit: timing, tact, and tone. You know, of how we show up in those moments when both want to win. You know, is this a good time for us to discuss this? Right? And certainly how I show up, my time, the tact and the tone in which I say it. If I'm coming in with a haughty spirit, I'm coming in with a, you know, rolled eyes, like, oh, good grief, right? Spirit, right? Condescending. That's what the word I was looking for. If I'm coming in with a condescending spirit, a demeaning spirit, there's not going to be a chance, right? And so Susan was saying how I show up to that moment may make a really big difference in how both of us can back down or step away from a very locked in position, right? Not all things can be solved. Okay. John Gottman, who's kind of a marriage guru, has written a lot of books. He said basically the marriage masters really actually believe this, that not all problems are solvable. And so sometimes we have to believe that. So what will that mean is the big question underneath that this may be an unsolvable problem. You know, it could be a mother-in-law issue. It could be a health issue. It could be a financial issue. It could be about homeschool versus public school or public school versus private school, right? It may not be a solvable problem and that somebody not necessarily has to lose, but maybe the negotiation begins with you get to do homeschool for a year and next year we're going to do public school, right? And so my hope is that it moves to a place of negotiation where there isn't necessarily a clear winner and someone not being able to get any part of their desire. So.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think just practically speaking, what do you do in that situation? I think is making sure that you're hearing and understanding each other,
Mhm.
and then taking a pause,
Mhm.
stepping away, having some time of prayer, maybe even fasting,
Mhm.
seeking counsel from a wise other,
Mhm.
and then coming back together. God is quite amazing, right? And I believe if you're both praying and seeking Him, that He's going to help you to come to some agreement.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I think practically those are some steps you can take when you get into the weeds of those really difficult conflicts.
Mhm. And every relationship has those conflicts, right?
Mhm.
Some relationships have less conflict than others, but all relationships have differences. And that's actually what we're talking about a lot of times, is just simply the differences, and how do we manage ourselves in the differences, right? Do we want to go, guns a-blazing into it, or do we want to say, hey, I really want to be present. I want to hear you, and I would like to resolve this to the best of our ability. Can we be okay? And then we're not okay in all things, certainly, but can we be okay if the resolution comes to here and not here, or not here, right? We aren't perfectly lined up, but we've learned to negotiate and manage ourselves when the problem isn't solvable, right? Kristen made a really good point. In a healthy relationship, this would inspire, wait a minute, you said something, ideally, each spouse would turn towards the other and compromise or recognize. Right. And I think, Kristen, you say you start off with really the perfect word, or sometimes the hard word, which is ideally, right?
Mhm.
And ideally that would, we would be able to have that turn towards one another, kind of extending that olive branch, not getting incited, not saying, wait a minute, we have some differences. How are we going to manage this? We also
Yeah.
want to be able to step into, because oftentimes our population is not ideal, and that there's somebody in the relationship that's very unideal and very, very strong. So how do we learn to manage ourselves in that relationship? And so we want to be able to speak into what Kristen's brought up of what the ideal looks like. But we also want to be able to manage ourselves when ideal doesn't happen. Okay.
Absolutely. Great point. Yes. More questions. I will read the next one if you're okay with that. What do you do when you're with your husband, his friends, and he brings up a dirty joke? You tell him it's inappropriate, but he says he is free with his friends to say what they want.
Well, I think you spoke up, and I think you heard his position. And I think at this point you don't agree. I think it's, you think it's inappropriate. And so you spoke up. But at the end of the day, he is free to say what he wants to say. Right.
Mhm.
I think those
Yeah,
are
and
really hard. And I'm not agreeing with your spouse at all. I'm just saying he has the freedom to use his thoughts and his feelings and his speech the way he wants to use it. Now, how you stay in relationship with that belongs to you, right? But his words belong to him, and how he shares himself with others belongs to him. And it's disappointing.
Yes, it
Right?
is disappointing. Yes, and
Yeah.
there's the difference is how you view appropriate and inappropriate, right? So
Yeah.
for him, it is appropriate to give people what they want, right? If the friends are going to laugh, then it's appropriate to say what he said for him, right? And for you, it feels
Right.
inappropriate. So
Right.
you can only own your side of that and behave appropriately. And really being respectful means allowing somebody to make their own choices, valuing them to
Right.
be a free human being and allowing them to make decisions that you even think are mistakes,
Right. Right.
which is hard. Very
Very, very
disappointing, like Elise said.
right. Right. Yeah. Don't hear us condoning it, hearing us say we're disappointed. Right.
We are
Yeah.
disappointed, yes.
Yeah. Another question.
Yeah, would you talk about what we need for a bit? Sometimes it's not just if something happens, but rather how it happens.
Mm.
Maybe a woman needs her husband to be pleasant for her to engage in physical intimacy. The question being, is he willing to help her be her best?
Well, I would say, is that the question? I'm not sure what the question is. Go
So
ahead.
I think it's still a confusion about needs versus wants.
Or
Um,
desires. Mhm.
and desires. Yes. So you desire him perhaps to be pleasant
Mhm. Mhm.
for you to want to engage in physical intimacy. This
Mhm.
may be less about need and want and more about a boundary, right? I'm not okay. If you don't treat me like a decent human being,
Mhm.
I'm not willing
Mhm.
to be physically close with you because that doesn't feel good to me,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
And that's part of what we start to define in our walking in core strength group is establishing what are your boundaries, what are your deal breakers, what are your preferences, what things do you want to stand for and say, you know what, this is not okay with me.
Right. Yeah.
And how do you follow through on a boundary? That can
Right.
be very difficult.
Right.
And so having support in that is really useful, and to be around other women who understand and who are going through the same thing can be
Mhm.
incredibly
Mhm.
useful. And this is a group that is experiential, right? So we gather together, and yes, there's lots of great information to read, to learn, to watch, but we're having an experience where you can role play this, right? We can coach you through what would this look like?
Right.
How would you uphold a boundary? What would it sound like to speak the words?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
That's all good stuff.
And
I'm sorry, I was glancing over for a minute. Star 123 writes, it's not really a question. I think it's a comment, but it's a great comment. H wants to pretend we have a real marriage by us sleeping in the bed together and says, I'm a rebellious wife because I won't submit to his order. I don't really know what the order is. No, after years of getting woken up by his rage. Sleep is a need. And yes, I would say sleep is a need. Absolutely.
mhm,
Right.
yes.
And so, yeah, you have a need to sleep. And if, I would say, are you pretending by sleeping in the same bed if you can't get sleep? I don't know. And so oftentimes, ladies, we really want to never in any way go, wait a minute, I'm not the one doing the wrong thing. My husband's over here, the one's telling a dirty joke. My husband's over here, the one that's, in a rage. My husband's over here, the one that, wakes me up and, yells at me. Right. And so we don't want to necessarily say, excuse that in any way. But
Mhm,
in core strength and certainly in conquer, we really want you to focus on you. We want to know that we want to kind of draw you to a place where you realize your freedom in your own choices, right? And I love that word pretend, Star, is that so oftentimes we are pretending. Like I am going to bed every night
mhm,
sleeping with him and I can't stand to be sleeping with, whatever it is, right? And why am I doing that, right? Instead of focused on him, we want you to focus on yourself. Why, can you stand up for yourself and say, hey, I repeatedly can't get sleep. So as Susan was talking about boundaries, I no longer am willing to do that. Right. And so we can't put a boundary on them. We can't say, you can't stop I can't keep you from raging. All I can say is, because you rage, I have to guard myself and I'm going to sleep in another room and get some good rest. Right.
mhm.
Because clearly you have to be at your best at some really hard times.
Yeah, and I love that point. That's something we work on too, is defining your problem rather than I see you've defined his problem is that he's pretending. His problem is he feels like he has a rebellious wife. His problem is he has rage, right? What is
Right.
your problem?
Right.
And then what do you do with your problem? Like Elise is saying, what do you do with the problem that you can't sleep and you need sleep? How are
Right.
you going to resolve that for yourself? Because she's right, we can't change your husband, but what can you do to change the situation so that you're getting your basic needs met?
Mhm. Right, exactly. Basic needs, there it is, right.
Yeah.
And those needs and whatever his opinion is of you are in conflict. My hope in that situation, your rest wins out, right? And so that you can be your best. mean, it's really, I mean, God shuts off the lights every night and says, go to bed. I believe that rest is a commandment. On the seventh day it is as well, so absolutely. So any more questions come in?
Yes. What
Okay.
advice would you give for what to do once you realize a disappointing truth about someone that's part of your life?
What advice would you give? So you have to listen to this.
Once you realize a disappointing truth about someone who's part of your life,
Yeah.
I think you recognize the disappointment
Yeah.
and you begin to work on acceptance that truth is truth. Accepting that truth is truth doesn't mean you like the truth,
Right.
but it means that you begin to see it as it is. And then you figure out, what do I want to do with my disappointment about this?
Exactly. And ladies, even though we said that in a few short words, we know that that's really a challenge. And,
is.
It is a place of grief when we have hope or, we believe something about someone that we find out is not true or not so. It's a great grief and a great disappointment. And in no way do we want to skim over that or minimize that in any way. You're going to need to grieve that things aren't any longer the way you thought they were, right?
Mhm.
We find out something about our spouse or our child or a loved one in any way, or an employer or employee, right? That we're going to have to take a moment. And what do we do with that? But you're going to hear this over and over again, that you have the freedom to make choices. How will I manage me knowing this truth and this reality? Right? It's a great disappointment. Right? And how will I manage that? That part will belong to you, as Susan says. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Susan, I do need to step off
Thank
at one. We can keep going, certainly. Or, I don't know if it's good to wrap up here, or if you're available just for a few more minutes, I certainly.
Yeah, we have 2 more questions, so I'll stay on until those are answered. You can pop off at least as you need to. I just put the banner up. You'll see that down
Yeah.
below.
Right.
I noticed Kelly was commenting. She's been looking for something like this. I'm glad you found us.
Yeah.
If you want more of what we're talking about, we are offering a walking and core strength group that runs over 3 months, every other week. It'll be the same day and time each week, 15 women, as Elise said. And so you just go to leslievernick.com/group coaching to learn more about that group and to sign up if you choose to join us. And I hope you do. It's really fantastic content and a great experience.
Yeah, I know in the years that I've taught it, at the end, every time, at the end, everyone's so sad that it's over and that we won't keep going, and how much they always reflect about how much they've learned in the process. We take it nice and slow. Basically, every 2 weeks we meet. We'll go over. We spend a little bit more time on the R piece, which is really about taking responsibility for yourself, and so we'll spend an extra lesson on that piece. But we take, essentially 2 weeks for each one of the letters, and really deep dive around that. What does it mean to be committed to truth? What does it really mean to be available to wise others? What is that going to look like? Sometimes that's pretty scary.
Mhm.
What does it really mean to take responsibility for yourself, right? While remaining respectful. That's always a hard piece. Like, I'm going to take full responsibility, but boy, is that hard to be respectful to the other side when they are really not respectful, right? And then engaging in empathy and compassion. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful time. And again, I must say that at the end, I'm always get super connected to the groups. I love it. And I think the women really love and engage. They realize they're not alone. And we're not doing this journey and this next step alone at all, but it is with an intimate group. And so please come join us. So
Yeah.
love you all. Thank you for having me and being on the
Thank you,
group.
Elise, for joining me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye, Elise. So if you're all able to stay for a couple more minutes, I'll just address these couple more questions. Do you have suggestions about how to move forward when he ignores your needs for true connection? I'm used to giving in to him, but I'm holding my ground this time. It's very uncomfortable. And he is stonewalling. Yeah, that gets really difficult when you're dealing with somebody who's going to use stonewalling to get you to move and change course. And so you're holding your ground. I'm curious what that looks like. And I think there are probably a lot of other women who identify this with this scenario and could help support you in this. How do you move forward when he's ignoring your need for true connection? So I don't know what you mean by giving in to him, um, or what you mean by true connection, right? So different people have different ideas about what that means, and he may not even know what you mean by true connection, right? He may not have that desire within him to connect in the same way you do. He may be thinking, connecting sexually is enough for him, right? He may not be even in tune to what something else might look like. And so I think being curious and being non judgmental and helping move through defining what the real issue is and kind of talking more deeply about what you are looking for might help. And perhaps you've done that, right? And so I always say start there. And then we work on what happened when those things, when you've done all the healthy ways of relating with somebody, and you start to recognize I'm dealing with somebody who's destructive or very unhealthy, what next? And I would anticipate that it is very uncomfortable for you. And staying well can be uncomfortable. And it sounds like you're in a relationship where you're choosing to stay. And we certainly respect that. But how do you stay well for yourself can be difficult. And so I would love to chat more with you about what's happening as you start to define what connection is, as you start to invest in connection yourself, what happens within him, right? Is he moving away from you? Um, so if you would like to join us in this group, please go to leslievernick.com/group coaching. Could you ladies suggest a scenario which would be a good example of seemingly conflicting needs? Well, I think we've been touching on that a little bit, and the last question kind of addressed that. What about different needs for sex, right? He wants sex 5 times a week, and you want it once a month, right? And is it really a need? So when you put it in that need language, like Elise was saying, there seems to be an urgency and a feeling of I'm not going to be okay if I don't get it, right? And really, this can be moved down to a want. I want that, but I can still be okay if I don't get what I want. And so that just kind of loosens that pressure of the discussion for there to be a winner. It doesn't feel life or death anymore. It feels like, oh, okay, we're two different people and we have two different ideas about how life could work well for us or how this relationship can work well. And then when you loosen that urgency, then you can begin to have a more open discussion. So you might be coming up with your own scenarios of when conflict begins because two people want two different things. So, still comment in the chat. You can get support here. So this is why we love to go on Facebook, is because there's a community of people who have joined together because we're in similar situations, and that we can bounce ideas off each other, and that we can begin to have a dialogue and support each other through this. So if you have a particular scenario, even throw it in the chat. The coaches go back through and read the chat, and we can address some of that even after this live finishes. So I'm just reading, someone wrote something in here. I'm perplexed about how to address our anniversary when there is so much discomfort and stress over unhealthy behaviors. And I think it's really, thinking about how do you want to address it? What would feel good to you? Is there something to celebrate about your relationship? Um, and that seems like there's so much more information I could collect from you. Um, you know, what can you do in the midst of discomfort and stress? What can you begin to enjoy about your spouse, even when there's some things that you don't enjoy? So finding some balance. And I don't know what you're talking about, Terry. I don't know if there's real safety issues. I don't know if there's extreme abuse going on. And so, certainly, if your gut is telling you that you don't want to be celebrating this relationship because of abuse, I would definitely support you in that and to figure out how you want to address this with your husband. That can be a really difficult conversation. And that's something that we can practice even in our group coaching is how do you begin to have a conversation with somebody? How do you assert your voice in a way that is healthy? All right. So I thank you all for engaging. I don't see any more questions popping up here. But certainly continue to engage with each other in the chat, and I will check back and read the comments. I thank you, Coach Leanne, for joining us and for your contribution in the chat, and thank you always, as always, to the tech team, the Stronger Together team, for helping us out and joining in the chat as well. So once again, I've got the banner up here, leslievernick.com/group coaching. If you want more information or you're interested in joining, some of our groups are already filled, but we would love to accommodate you in finding a group that would work for your schedule. And I appreciate you all being here. Go on and have a happy Monday and be well. Thank you so much.